Hey guys, NJ here, and today we're looking at Diatone's offering into the 2-inch micro quad market. Now, they've taken their time bringing something out. Obviously this market is being flooded with micro drones from every company imaginable, and you know, there's a lot of good stuff out there. You certainly see a few that I've reviewed, like the Leader and the Lizard, etc. You know, there's just loads of them out there, and there's lots more I have to look at as well. But I'm always excited by the Diatone stuff because I've reviewed everything that Diatone have thrown out there so far in the quad world, and it's always had some, you know, great features, more importantly some great innovation, and they take their time for a reason. You know, they always come up with the goods. So let's have a quick look at what else comes in the box before we have a look at the quad itself. It comes in this tiny little box. You get your usual Diatone stickers. The quad itself comes on there without the props on there, and then we also have, let me get the box out here, a nice comprehensive bag of spares. So it doesn't come with a battery or receiver, so you will need to add those. Now I chose to add the XM Plus, really decent little micro receiver, but the RXSR is also a great option if you want to have the telemetry coming back to your Tyrannus. This has an OSD, we'll go more onto that later, so I'm not too worried about that. But it does give you the other side of what you'll need for the battery, which is an XT30, so it gives you the other side of that. A couple of rubber bands, a sticky pad, which is this nice grippy rubber stuff for the underside of there. Spare side plates, spare kind of tail section where you can see I've mounted the antennas, rip ties, screws, side screws, motor screws. So yeah, classic Diatone, they just give you all the bits you need. You also have in here prop guards. Now, if you're going to race indoors and you're around a lot of hard surfaces, it makes a lot of sense to have prop guards because you'll just go through props like nobody's business. So that's kind of a cool thing. The props they include, and this is a running theme with Diatone, they always give you amazing quadcopters and then throw in completely terrible props. I mean, I'm fine with that because it's the cheap disposable bit of the quad, but I don't know why they always seem to include terrible props, and these are no exception. They are just square, bullnose, terrible camber, terrible profile, noisy, and don't fly nicely. So yeah, just don't bother with those at all. Go with the ones that I always recommend on the 2-inch, which are the trusty Gemfan 2035x4s. These just about clear the frame, and they fly beautifully, as they have on pretty much all my 2-inch micros. So those are the props to put on there. You also get a spare one of these, which is the frame. I'm not actually going to pull that out, but I'll show you it. This is the stack. Now it's a 3D printed stack. You can see it's got this little tail here. This is for the antenna, the VTX antenna, and then the VTX slides into this bottom section. It's got a little capture lug there, so it goes in and clicks in. The ESC goes on next, and then you have the vibration isolating dampeners, and then the F4 board goes on top of that. So that's really cool. They give you a spare one of those in case you break that. Let's just pop those bits back in there, and then we'll move on to the quad itself. So what we have here, let's first of all start at the front. The camera is a proper CCD camera, and the picture is really nice. Now, you can plug in a standard HS1177 OSD programming cable there, and I'm sure if you fly quads already, you've got 100 of those lying around, and it's pretty easy to get to. If you just loosen these screws, these two on the side, you can actually change the angle of the camera, which is nice, you know, right up to like literally to 90 degrees, which is nuts. But it does mean that you can plug straight into that, which is quite nice. You can access it quite easily, so that's kind of a cool thing. The camera settings came set up pretty much perfect, to be honest with you. Wide dynamic range was on by default. It was maxed out. You know, someone's gone through and made sure the settings are correct on this from the off. It has a 2.3mm lens. I normally fly 2.1, but anything between 2.1 and 2.5 I consider to be pretty much spot on for freestyle, so you can just see a little bit extra around the sides and a little more vertically, which is important if you want to land nice and flat when you're running a high camera angle. So great choice of lens, I think. And what else can I say? This camera in the settings, first thing to note, it did actually, I think the setting, it was actually in Chinese, so you will need to, I think it's in the main menu, if you go 2 up from the bottom and press enter, that will give you the language option to change to English, so just pre-warning you about that, but you don't really need to mess with the settings. It does have in the exposure menu, AGC is an option to change. Now that is, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it's normally something you don't see as an option, or it's there, AGC, but then there's just 4 dashes. You can't actually adjust it on most 1177s, but on this one you can. And with it off, you get kind of a really nice, rich, high contrast picture. But then that's not very good for when you're flying at night. And if you turn the AGC on to high, it's a much better picture at night. So if you want to have a good in-between, set AGC to low, and you'll have a good daytime and nighttime picture. If you're just only ever going to fly in the day, then just turn AGC off and you'll get a much nicer kind of high contrast picture. So there's that. Moving around to the motors, as you know, Diatone have a great relationship with Sunny Sky, and Sunny Sky developed these. Now these are their Edge Racing motors. They are 1104 6000 kV, and I've flown a lot of micros with that stator size. And I have to say, these are not like those. There are a lot of those kind of generic, they all look very similar, like they're coming out the same factory, and a lot of those other models that are out there at the minute. These are not, I mean, these feel super premium, that you can tell Sunny Sky have done good work here. They feel nice and planted, and the torque feels good as well. I'm really happy with the way these are performing, and yeah, nothing but good things to say about those motors. Why they chose 6000 kV instead of 7500 kV, which tends to be the more popular kV, well, there's a good reason for that, and that's because this model is actually 4S compatible, and you definitely wouldn't want to be going nuts with the kV if you're going to be raising the voltage, because obviously you're going to be getting more turns per volt. So this whole setup is 4S compatible. As I said, it doesn't come with a battery, and that means that you have to have a little bit of a think about what kind of battery you want to run. Now, I've only tested this on 3S, but I did test it with what I think was a real sweet spot for this, which was a 450 milliamp 3S60C Nanotech battery, Turnigy, and that performance was perfect. The power to weight, everything was absolutely spot on. 3.5 minutes of just fun, lots of throttle. It was just great. So that's what I've tested so far. I've got some flight footage for you at the end to check that out, so you can see how that fared up. But if we were going to test the 4S, the thing is, we need to try and keep the weight down, because as it is, as you're looking at it there, that thing weighs 75 grams. Now, finding a 4S battery that weighs 75 grams is a bit of a mission. So, you know, if you find any, drop it in the comments and let me know, and I'll get them and test them. But really, we want around that 400 milliamp on a 4S, I think, because the struggle is going to be to keep a battery under 75 grams, and you know, you certainly wouldn't do that on a 5-inch, would you? You wouldn't be running a battery that, you know, weighs as much as the Quad does. So I think it's a good idea to try and keep that in mind if you are looking for a 4S. Anything of a high, like, you know, if you're talking, you know, anything up of about 400 milliamps, the weight's going to go up and up and up, and then you're going to start being in that point where we get diminishing returns, and you know, you won't generate the thrust with these tiny props, even if it is doing the higher kVs, to take care of it. But anyway, that's enough about that. As I said, it's got this little plastic section here at the top, which has got this little kind of loop where you can put zip ties to mount your antenna, and you see I've done that and continued the red and white theme just so it looks nice. The F4 on here is their Mini Fury, and I think it's an omnibus target. I'm not entirely sure on that, but it does come really well set up. They've already turned on dynamic filters, and they've done a little bit of tuning for you, which is really nice to see. It's got a 16 megabyte flash memory on there, which is a great thing, so you can do some black boxing. It's got the OSD chip, which is also awesome. Another cool thing, as I said, this is an F4, so you can do up to 32 kilohertz. Now, personally, I don't bother. 8K is absolutely fine for this, which will, you know, barely wake up an F4, probably like 6% CPU load. but you know, it's there, the power's there if you wanted to go crazy. The VTX down at the bottom here, now that is a TBS Unify. How cool is that? I've not seen anyone put a TBS Unify into a micro, and that's an absolutely great VTX. That's one that I use in pretty much all of my larger builds, and it comes pre-wired with smart audio. Smart audio is wired in there, so we can use our Betaflight OSD to change our VTX channel. That's so cool. If you're racing with a bunch of friends and you want to change your VTX channel, you can do it through your OSD with your Tyrannus sticks. That's a very cool thing. Really like the idea that they've done that. Now you can also see here, just above that we have the ESC. It's a 4-in-1. It is a fairly standard 600 D-Shot 600, 4 by 15 amps, which is absolutely fine. As I said, it's 4S ready, and it has a burst rating of 4 by 20 amps. Absolutely fine. Plenty of headroom on something that weighs 75 grams. Doesn't even need that much, but yeah, you've got the headroom there if you wanted it. Now, they've also done a great job in adding soft mounting in this design to the F4, and that is absolutely critical if you're going to run an F4 on a micro. The F4s are sensitive to noise anyway, but they're really sensitive to high frequency noise, and personally, this is just my opinion, I don't think F4s really have a place in micros. I don't think they're I don't think they're really a great choice. I mean, the MCU 6000 that goes in a lot of F3s, it's just, you know, Boris himself said that the MCU 6000 is just a great all-round gyro because it's so good at ignoring motor noise. And the MCU 6000 that goes in things like the leader in the Eachine Lizard, and you can see how well that flies. Stock Betaflight PIDs, plug in play, absolutely brilliant. Dynamic filter on, notch 1 and 2 off, and you've seen my videos of how well that thing flies. You know, the performance is great, and it's hard mounted. There is no soft mounting, so it's absolutely critical that they had to soft mount this, and they did. And in fact, a prime example of that was this guy. Now, this was something I was sent to review, and I couldn't even get this thing to fly, and this was a case of where all the specs were there. This was the SBC Maker 90NG, and this is an expensive piece of gear, and it had, you know, 1104, 7500 kV, Runcam Micro Swift, F4 flight controller with Betaflight OSD. You know, it was ticking all the boxes. XT30, I thought this is going to be a great little machine. Armed it, shook itself to death, wouldn't even get off the ground. So I thought it was maybe a problem with this particular one. They sent me another one, exactly the same problem. So yeah, this needed soft mounting. F4 flight controllers just don't like hard mounting at all, and that really does kind of support the argument. This unfortunately is an unflyable quad in its current state. This will need taking apart and some kind of soft mounting solution to actually get this to even fly. It has an F4. I would have preferred an F3 with the MCU 6000. Now what this means is they've had to do some tuning with the PIDs, and even the PIDs that came with this I think weren't right. And you know, every machine's going to be slightly different anyway. Maybe it'll work on yours, on this one it didn't. The F4 being that little bit sharper, that little bit more sensitive to noise, you do have to spend some time PID tuning, so be aware of that. I've done a lot of tuning with this. The fact that you've got that flash chip on here means that you can actually at the very least do some black box logging so that you can see how your tune is doing, but the main thing is that you can actually go and deal with that and get that tune as good as possible. So you'll get a sharper tune overall, but at the cost of not being able to just run stock Betaflight PIDs. That's just the way it is. So you have a standard USB port round on this side, and then as you can see here it is terminated with an XT30. Now the XT30 also has on the underside here, you can see a little PCB, and this PCB has a shunt on it. That's because this has actually got a current sensor on it, which is kind of a cool thing. Rather than, if they couldn't get the current sensor on the flight controller or the ESC, Diatone literally moved that little PCB with the shunt onto the connector itself, so this has current sensing too. Again, you can see this in your OSD, so that's a really cool thing too. So all in all, I think this is a really smart little quadcopter, and at the price point, for the amount of tech that's on here, it's brilliant and it flies great. Have a look at the flight footage and see what you think, but yeah, I really like it. It certainly gets a thumbs up from me.